Yao, so good to speak with you today in front of so many people on a Saturday. Before we begin, I'd like to, of course, briefly share the topic of our conversation and also the flow so our audience can follow and catch up with us as well. So the title of today's conversation is The Future of Investing in Singapore, and we'll begin by looking at the retail landscape right here before moving on to new investment opportunities at SGX, the role retail investors play before looking at really what's next for the local boss. So, Yao, let's get the conversation started. And let's start with the present right now. How would you describe the current retail investor landscape in Singapore? Are we seeing more participation, or is it all just noise?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to speak at this event. It's my first time attending the MooFest, and actually, I think this reflects the retail investing landscape in Singapore. This is the energy. This is a community of people who want to learn, who want to connect, and who want to invest and build their financial wealth. So this is where we come in, SGX, to provide that trusted platform. But it's interesting to see how retail has evolved over the years. Clearly, it's become a lot more sophisticated. Liberation Day, something that we will always remember. When Donald Trump announced his tariffs in April, stocks fell. But guess who came in? Retail net bought 1.5 billion when the bank stocks fell, the local bank stocks. And look where the banking stocks are trading at. And we have seen retail investing behavior coming reflected in our inflows in REITs in the last 6 months. If I look at the REIT ETFs that we have, the inflows from the retail have gone up by 25%. So that reflects investors, our retail investors, really looking at our market, knowing what to pick, and actually timing the market pretty well as well.
So from SGX's perspective, right, Yao Long, what are the key trends really shaping how retail investors are engaging with the market today? And what role do you see platforms like Moo playing in this regard in making investing more accessible and actionable for retail investors?
I think it's really about building a community, right? So what we have, and traditionally this is what the ecosystem does. We have information, we pass it down, people use the brokers to access the platforms, to get access to the markets. But I think it has moved beyond that. It has gone personalized, as Gavin has shown us. People are trading a wider range of instruments. I was quite struck by what Gavin showed in terms of the number of investors or proportion of investors trading crypto. This is what is happening on the ground, right? The younger investors are digitally native. They trade globally, and they trade all kinds of asset classes to build a diversified portfolio. And this is where SGX wants to play a role. We do have our cash market. This is the stocks that you're all familiar with, the DBSs of the world, the SIAs, and so on, right? But what we have are also ETFs that provide underlying across the globe, offering thematic exposures. We have got S&P 500, we've got gold as well. So these are all interesting stuff which our investors can access. And we have the depository receipts, which Mike mentioned, right? So from the ease of accessing the Singapore market, you can now actually get exposure to both Thai and Hong Kong underlying, such as Meituan, Xiaomi, and so on.
Now, you've talked about some new opportunities at SGX, right? In particular, the ETFs, Hong Kong-listed DRs, DLCs. What's the strategic thinking behind these launches, and which asset classes or instruments right now are attracting the most interest today?
The platform provides different choices for the investors to access. So as I said, we have gold, which is doing very well given the uncertainty, and our investors can access that through the ETF or paper format. We've got fixed income, and actually because of what's happening globally, there's been an interest in both Sing dollar and Sing dollar credit. And we see that in our fixed income ETFs. We clearly see that in our REITs. You have seen recent follow-on offerings by our existing REITs that are traded on SGX. And we are going to celebrate an IPO, a data center IPO, which will be our third, that's going to be listed on SGX on Monday. And what I've heard is that it is multiple times oversubscribed. So many people will say, look, you don't have the likes of NVIDIA on SGX. It is true. What we can clearly is to look at whether we could do a depository receipt on such underlying. But there are other ways where you can get exposure to AI. Data center is one way. Digital infrastructure is one way. You just do it in a different format, in a REIT format, but that gives you exposure to the macro trends of the world.
Since you talked about IPO, data center, and etc., let's talk more about that. IPOs, they are often seen as the market barometer for vibrancy. So why is SGX seeing fewer IPOs, if I'm right on that track? And what is the current strategy around this? And if I could stretch the question a bit, some say SGX listings are skewed towards Chinese companies. Is this by design, or is this due to broader structural factors that we need to address?
Quite a few questions wrote into your
We must
what
put
you
you in
just
the hot
asked me.
seat.
Yeah. The IPO question is a perennial question. We've got to deal with it. I'm impressed with what Hong Kong Exchange and other exchanges has done in terms of bringing companies to the public markets. This is what we are quite focused on, together with the committee or the work group led by the Minister Chee Hong Tat. And we are focused on trying to solve the issues that can better improve our market. So for example, in terms of liquidity, we need liquidity, right? Liquidity in the secondary markets. The 5 billion that MAS is carving out of its balance sheet to allocate to active asset managers, I believe that will be helpful. We have also set up Temasek has also set up the anchor fund of 1.5 billion, if I'm not wrong, to invest in pre-IPOs and IPOs. All this will take some time. And I think what is important is, for the first time in many, many years, the government, the ecosystem, the public and private sectors are coming together to implement, to introduce measures that are mutually reinforcing. It's not done sporadically. It's not done in a piecemeal manner. It's about bringing liquidity. It's about expanding product shelf. It's about improving investor access. For example, we have been looking at our bought lot sizes. We know that some of our stocks have done very well. The prices have gone up, and we want to improve accessibility of these stocks to many, many parts of our investing population. And so we will be looking at things like whether we should reduce bought lot size. So stay tuned, and we'll be announcing, hopefully, some of these measures in due course.
Right, keeping us excited at this point, Yao Long. Let's talk more about empowering investors through collaborations and partnerships. I mean, SGX has always emphasized investor education and empowerment. So what are some of the key initiatives in place today?
The overall thrust of our investor education is to try and build a community. It's not a one-way download. I'm very conscious of that the way investors and general population at large, how they consume content is very, very different. How my daughter looks at a phone and interacts with her friends, it's a very different world that I'm familiar with, right? So it's not just about the content, it's also about the delivery. It's also about the personalization. And that's where we can work with partners like moomoo, who has already developed that cutting-edge technology, the cutting-edge tools, who already has 1 in 2 of our Singapore population from age between, I think, 20 and 70 in their system. And that's where I think collaboration amplifies and self-reinforce.
Okay. Now, let's look at the road ahead in terms of where markets are at, capital flows are. Can you speak to us on the flow of funds across asset classes? Are we seeing meaningful overseas capital coming into the SGX right now?
Well, we are seeing flows into SGX. Sometimes it's really hard to say whether they are foreign or local, especially given that Singapore is an international hub, right? There are many foreigners who base their operations or their family offices here and so on. So to me, what I'm concerned with is whether we are able to get the inflows in, whether they come from overseas or from regional, and what are they coming in. So clearly, we see fixed income doing quite well, the Sing dollar credit, the Sing dollar currency in general. What's also interesting, which I didn't mention earlier, besides the big caps or major caps that are doing, or large caps that are doing well, we also see the mid cap and the small cap segment. And it's not just the retail. We have seen net institutional inflows into this mid-cap segment for the last 5 consecutive months. So clearly, what the government has announced in terms of the $5 billion that they are going to deploy in the non-index stocks has worked, even before they have actually deployed the money, right? The money hasn't been deployed. MES were announced in due course. But investors are already positioning themselves. The smart money are looking at what are the stocks that are doing well, what are the stocks that may be a little bit undervalued, and they are already going into these stocks to reflect their belief and conviction that these are the stocks that will be the winners of tomorrow.
And you know, Yao Long, earlier you talked about tapping global trends, be it AI through data centers and etc. How is SGX then positioning itself to ride on these global trends like AI rally, green finance, or even increased demand for commodities?
Yeah, so this question, I think, sometimes people will just say, look, you've got to get IPOs. Clearly, IPOs are important. You have seen the data center REIT that's coming. And actually, a few days or a couple of weeks ago, we actually had a software as a service company, Infotech, that listed on SGX. So can we grow a software as a service cluster in Singapore on the SGX? This is something that we are paying serious attention to. There are different ways where we will offer these exposures. It's not just through cash securities. We have the ETFs. We actually, I think, have 6 sustainability-linked ETFs that have crossed the $2 billion AUM threshold. It actually started from nothing in 2021. And now if I add all of them up, we've got 6 ETFs that are more than 2 billion and offering exposure to different sectors. Green REITs is one. There's even a low carbon that's by Lion OCBC. It's 40 Singapore stocks, and it has done really, really well. If you check out the performance, in the last 12 months. It's definitely over 20-25%. And what's interesting in that portfolio is you actually get exposure to some of the well-known names like Grab and Sea as well. And then there's 25% of that portfolio or the underlying stocks are in our mid-cap segments. So there are different ways that you can get exposure, whether it's ETFs, whether it's structured warrants, whether it's depository receipts. Right now, as I said, we have 21. We started with nothing 2 years ago. So we have 10 underlying stocks from the Thai market, and you'll be familiar if you go through the airport of Thailand, and then in Hong Kong names are pretty famous, Meituan and Xiaomi. So this is a whole gamut of product choices that's out there. But it sometimes can be confusing because there are just too many choices. And that's where working with the likes of moomoo is important, because this is where they offer that personalization, knowing what you have, your risk appetite, your history of trading, and they can put together recommendations to say, this is what you might want to think about. So, array of choices, the tools to help you think and to be informed of what works best for you as an individual. And I think that makes for a powerful combination.
You know, if we set our sights on the road ahead, in the next 3 to 5 years per se, Yalong, how do you see the role of SGX and also the partnerships with players like moomoo evolving as more investors demand speed, choice, and also access?
Well, investors have a wide range of choices to invest, right? It's not just in Singapore. And we recognize that our investors here are very, very sophisticated. And they want exposure to the world. And they are digitally native, as I said. So what SGX will do, and has already started in our journey, is to be able to offer that product choice. It's not just about Singapore underlying, but you would be able to invest in the underlying securities of other markets through products in Singapore. You can put them together, you can trade them in Sing currency, which we are all very, very familiar with, and which we actually like because there's strength in that currency. And with that, the choice is there, working with partners like moomoo, which then provides that personalization, which actually reflects similar values in helping our investors, our market participants in building up their financial wealth. It's not a product, but it's a solution to meet your needs.
And you know, there's one thing that's on all of our minds, and you've briefly mentioned that earlier, and that is the $5 billion government grant to boost capital markets. Where do you think that investment would be most impactful?
Well, they have already said they will look at the non-STI stocks. You know, our STI stocks, the top 30, they are around 80 to 85% of our turnover volume. So they're going to look at the next segment. And already people are looking at it. The smart money are already looking at it. But I believe there's still quite a lot of potential. There's still some gems. And this is what we'll do to work with the ecosystem, with the research analysts, with the brokers, with other members of the community. It could even be key opinion leaders, the influencers, to make people more aware of where these mid-cap gems are.
And Yalong, what changes can we expect from the ongoing consultation on the complex products regime? How will this affect retail access and protection then?
Well, the consultation is going on. They just issued the paper. I am encouraged by what MES is trying to do. They have clearly taken on board the feedback that the regime needs some form of tweaking, right? Many of our investors are already very experienced and have the knowledge, frankly, also assisted by their brokers or their trading representatives. So we should be very conscious of putting in many, many hurdles in the investing journey. In many of what we are trying to do, we are trying to make the user experience very, very good, very smooth. And in trying to put up hurdles or gates, we got to be very conscious that it is targeted, it actually does what it intends to achieve, and it doesn't put unnecessary hurdles such that people say, look, this is way too complicated, and let me do something else. And I'm very conscious that people, when they do something else, they can enter into the unregulated space, or they can go somewhere else where they think it is easier. It is important that markets like the SGX, where we offer very transparent rules, we are a lit market, that means you have proper surveillance, that is able to offer that choice so that you can invest knowing that the products, the way the system works, is in a very predictable and transparent way.
So we've talked a lot about the retail investing landscape, what is next, and also what is the SGX doing right now to inject vibrancy. But if you would like our audience to take home one message for today, what would that be?
Well, I think it's a general advice. Well, if I can even say an advice, even though I think I'm not that old, but it is actually to start early in your journey, right? I think I was just reflecting on this, and compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. which I think someone has said it. I thought it was Einstein. I'm not very, very sure, but I think it was him. And I think that's true, right? And I think that compounding effect on your investments, and actually that compounding effect of your investing experience will then add up to create that value creation and the wealth creation.
You know what, Yao Long, you ended just right on the dot when the counter is 0. So fantastic, guy. Thanks so much for the insights today, Yao Long. And we really look forward to more exciting updates from SGX. And a big thank you to you for joining us in this fireside chat titled Shaping the Future of Investing in Singapore.